Well, you are back, but you were also really back to Latvian politics because you were in the European Parliament. I'm looking forward to talking to you about that, but you're very focused on international trade as part of that. And then even earlier, when I got a chance to know you, is when you were Minister of Foreign Affairs of Latvia from 2004, from 2007. So you've done the foreign policy, the defense and security policy, the European policy, and there is so much to talk about. But Dr. Pabriks, welcome, and let me be the first to say, if no one has said it, Happy Europe Day today.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you here. You know, thinking of Europe Day, the 15th anniversary of Latvia joining NATO, we were here a few weeks ago celebrating that 70th anniversary, and NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg gave an extraordinary speech to the joint session of Congress. I even walked over to look at the accession protocols of Latvia and signing that. 15 years ago, could you have imagined that 1,400 NATO forces would be in Latvia today?
Well, we were dreaming all the time about that.
You were dreaming of it?
Well, if I may remind,
Please.
actually, that was a little bit maybe harsh to say in those days, but when I was first time a defense minister in Riga conference, and that was something like 2000, maybe 11, then from podium I told that we are looking forward for German boots on our ground. And at that time people, of course, were thinking, what the hell is this guy telling? And
that was controversial, I'm sure.
Well, and then 3 years later, we have a German boots on the ground, a little bit more to the south in Lithuanian soil, and actually everybody's happy. We have Canadians and 8 more nations there, including United States. So, I mean, we always welcome friends, and we always will send away those who are not friends. Yes,
no, absolutely. I just would welcome any reflections you have on the NATO 70th anniversary, and boy, we are now looking ahead and thinking about the next time NATO leaders will gather in London in December. It's been a little rocky for NATO, I think, in adjusting to a U.S. voice that was really going to insist on defense spending and 2%. But Latvia has a good story to tell on 2%. Share your thoughts on where NATO is today with enhanced forward presence and where you would like to see it go.
Okay, well, first of all, if you are speaking about enhanced forward presence, I think it is basically a duty of an organization which is committed to defend each and every of its member against any kind of aggression, to guarantee that there is not only a political will, but also a practical capabilities of that union or that organization to act when the necessity comes. And Latvia and other Baltic states and a number of other countries which have been joining NATO a little bit later, now we are 15 years in NATO, of course always have been reminding about that look, even if everything looks peaceful and even if somebody is still reminding about those books which appeared not to be fully true, like Fukuyama's End of History, we still would like to see that security and security guarantees across all the NATO territory is spread equally. So I cannot fully explain our membership of NATO to Latvian or Lithuanian or Polish citizens if they see that maybe NATO members in Portugal or Spain or France can feel more secure than NATO members in Latvia or Lithuania or Poland. So security must be equal, and that means, of course, that there must be a specific jobs to be done, practical jobs to be done in order to guarantee that, which includes also the necessity, if there is such one, for additional troops from another countries, if we require that, to be on our soil. And in that sense, enhanced forward presence, which in Latvia is comprised of not a large battle group, about 1,500 200 soldiers from other countries, led by Canadians, but there are larger contingencies from armies of Poland, of Spain, and some other nations. As they are there, we are happy about this. Actually, Latvia is a very great place for other countries' soldiers to be, because this is a good food, good nature, society is very pleasantly receiving them, so it's a really very friendly issue. But we have to remember that this is in order not to have crisis. And the most important issue for us, of course, is deterrence. Deterrence to anybody, hypothetical or not hypothetical, possible aggressor, because we believe that we must, and the best deterrence is to say that, look, if somebody is trying to joke with us, if somebody is trying to exercise on us the same, let's say, approaches like what we saw in 2008 in Georgia, or, for instance, Russian aggression against Ukraine, including the annexation of Crimea, that will not go through in the Baltic states. And if I have to say about the mindset of the Baltic nations and Latvians, then we have been learning bitterly from our own history, which is 1939. At that time, we were a little bit hesitant to defend our borders only for one reason, because we had a mighty superpower at that time, or large power against us, and we saw that we can save the lives of our men and women in order, by the peaceful opening of borders to aggressor. Obviously, that did not work. Today, I can with great confidence tell that if somebody is willing to cross our borders, we will shoot them. And if we will shoot them, then we also believe that those who might try to do this, they are not stupid, they are smart. And we can then have a meaningful understanding with each other. Because actually, if we here speak, for instance, about such hypothetical aggressive move from the Russian side, then I think that it's not so much about Baltics even, or Latvia. Because we have been always a litmus test for the Russian political approach to the West in large, to the transatlantic relationship in large. So if many things what maybe some of you are experiencing either in North America or in European countries, we have been experiencing for quite a long time. So for us it's nothing new. The problem is that sometimes we have been speaking about this before, for instance, Ukrainian war, but we have been not always receiving listening ear for those warnings. Now, bitterly enough, it appears that the right was on our side, that the things that we have been telling to our partners were correct. So I think from that perspective, I think we are a good example, and we can share also our knowledge about cyber attacks, about fake news, about strategic communication. And just before we go forward, I want to mention one more example why we think, with a little bit of pride, of course, that we notice those issues a bit earlier, because if we are looking, for instance, what kind of excellence centers do we have in all three Baltic states, then in Estonia, we do have an excellence center for cybersecurity, because Estonians were the first ones in 2007 to be attacked in a cyber attack. So they understood immediately what we have to do. We have to turn this power around and start to develop this. In Lithuania, they have been frequently meeting, inadequate energy policies from Russia, because we in the Baltics, like in Latvia, we pay for Russian gas larger price than Germans. Russian gas doesn't have a market price, it has a political price. Germany is much further away, we are a neighboring country, we pay more. So Lithuanians understood this, so there is an excellent center for energy security. We in Latvia have been meeting different types of media influences organized from our neighboring country. We understood quite early that if we are not tackling communication issues, then simply minds of free liberal democracies, of democratic countries, can be easily corrupt, because the goal of such kind of news and information warfare is simply to make people doubt societies, values where they're living in, and once you doubt yourself, you are losing the strength. You don't need any more tanks, because you will not resist, because you will not be willing to stand for those things which are important. So As an answer to this, we have a NATO Excellence Center for Strategic Communication, which have been assisting now a number of countries within the EU, within the NATO, and outside. So I think that is really an example how actually we can turn our geographical or geopolitical disadvantage into the advantage for many others. So do not hesitate to use our experience.
Just to pull it from your comment, were you frustrated? Was the Latvian government frustrated that, I know for many years, even when I was at the State Department, we heard prescient warnings to say that Russia could take these steps, and I think for large measure they were ignored, or we said, we understand why you feel this way because of your terrible history, but you should not be afraid, nothing will happen. And then events happened in 2008 and they happened again in 2014. Is there some frustration that you were not heard?
Well, of course there is sometimes frustration because we already know the old Roman saying, beware of your friends, with enemies we will manage ourselves. So our problem frequently have been, to go and talk to our allies, if you speak, and I speak here more about European allies, and not all, of course, and trying to explain them that, look, situation should not be assessed through the pink glasses. And I think those who have been familiar with political science, they know what is the difference between wishful thinking, the ideal state of a Greek pattern that Plato or Aristotle was writing, and about Machiavelli, who is the first political scientist, who actually was describing not an ideal state, but was describing the status quo, the situation, what really exists. We, as a borderland of European Union, we as a borderland of the West, we as a borderland of NATO country, we don't have a pleasure, we can't afford to think within the concept of illusion or wishful thinking. We have to be realists. Just like soldiers or officers, once they are assessing the possibilities or capabilities of their regiment, troops or units, they have no right to think in a wishful way. They have to precisely know what they can do and what they can't do. So in our case, the price of wishful thinking would be an existential threat to our country. And we understand, of course, those who didn't hear us frequently was because, for them, such type of crisis, which is of existential threat for us, would be just maybe a smaller crisis, like a little bit less jobs, a little bit smaller growth rate of GDP or something like this. So it's frequently, unfortunately, the situation where those which are fed well do not understand the hungry ones.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in 5 years since the annexation of Crimea, we've seen where NATO has made impressive strides in the land component with the battalion in Latvia, in Estonia, Lithuania, of course, a strong presence, a U.S. presence, particularly in Poland. We wrote a report a year ago that said that what we felt that what was lacking was the air component. And we had thought that perhaps the Baltic Air Policing, which has been a very successful program since you joined NATO 15 years ago, is it fit for purpose in case it requires an air defense component? So and again, as you return to the ministry, what strikes you as some issues where you want to focus and strengthen both Latvian resolve, but as well as NATO's deterrence?
Well, if we want to guarantee to all NATO citizens equal security, then of course we equally have to assess also all the threats what different places in NATO are seeing. And of course, if you are looking to the Latvian or the Baltic case, yes, we are paying 2% from our GDP for our defense. And in this regard, we are in total agreement with the United States' quest that also other countries should do this, because why should somebody else defend you if you are not ready to at least, lock your door once you sleep or buy a small insurance for your car? I mean, it's understandable. So in that sense, we are definitely on U.S. side. But looking from our personal perspective, we are still a small country, and even if we are a small and democratic country which wants to pay those 2%, it would be very difficult to guarantee everything what we need alone without being a part of this organization. And yes, we do have still a lack of air defense systems because our budget is not so large. We would be very happy to have on our territory middle-range rocket systems, Patriot systems, and such things. As far as air policing, yes, this was a great success. We are grateful to all those nations which are sending their planes to guard our sky, to guard our common sky, but there is still a lot of things what has to be done. And if you are looking, for instance, to our military budget and those 2% what we are spending, I think we have been quite rational how we were using this, because we do have a traditionally 12-year plan. How do we develop our armed forces? So that means that we know what we will be willing to buy or acquire in 5 or 6 years, and we have this priority list. Once the Ukrainian war started in 2014, maybe we had to readjust some of the points. Some priorities were moving from number 5 to number 3 or vice versa, but in general we knew, and there were no surprise. Not all actually NATO countries has such an approach, but even by knowing this, our budget, since this is not a very large budget with 2%, is already planned until 2027. So basically, we don't have almost spare money until 2027. And being a border region, it's very difficult to wait a very long time until we can get air defense systems in place. So this is one of the issues what I was also preaching here in Washington now in these days. And of course, we also would be willing to have larger military assistance, financial assistance, and we really can ensure that these finances and monies what we could get, for instance, from United States would be used with a purpose perfectly and increase our combat capabilities.
I'm sure every Pentagon official is extremely envious that you know where you're going and what your budget looks like to 2027. We've talked about land, air component. Let me talk about the maritime component, because Baltic Ops is going to be ready again annually for this June. In general, help us understand what you have learned from the series of exercises that have occurred both in the region, and they're continuous, but also last year's Trident Juncture. Tell us what your reflections are on sort of how we're exercising and what we're learning from those exercises.
Well, first I would like to say that, for instance, for Enhanced Forward Presence Group of these about 1,500 soldiers from other NATO countries in Latvia, they are not something separate. Because of the training and exercises together with Latvian armed forces, we basically could see them as a very good integral part of all our defense system. So they can act in a unison if something is happening. So the major goal, of course, for all such type of exercises, probably, if I have to say what is the major goal, it is really a territorial defense of our country. We don't have there such forces that we can pose any kind of a threat to such countries as Russia. So we frequently hear, and those who are more friendly or falling in the trap of Kremlin propaganda about NATO forces now being stationed forward and opposing aggression, I would say these are simple lies. So don't fall for this, or either you are yourself spreading fake news. Because if you are looking how Russia was developing their own capabilities, their own maneuvers, their own presence near our borders, near NATO's eastern borders, then for last 10 years we could see that they have a much larger scale of presence there, maybe 1 to 10, if not even more, with sophisticated weaponry and with aggressive type of military exercises. So I would have always, for those people who preach that we have some too much forward presence and which is endangering Russia, I would then tell, look, I mean, if Russia was increasing their presence at our eastern borders for last 10 years, what did they think? There will be no ever response for our side for this move? So we would stay silent and just observe until you are doing everything, and we stay just like a peaceful bird, without any kind of defense. It's impossible. So such type of exercises, like you mentioned, basically it serves our territorial defense. It serves to bring understanding between NATO nations together about how can we interact, because we must understand each other, we must communicate with each other, we must know how to act in the event of crisis. And then there are a number of other issues where, for instance, on the sea, we have a 500 kilometers coastline, and we have experiencing in our past two devastating world wars. Our waters are still full with mines, and we have to clean also these waters. So frequently also in such occasions we are also improving environment, we are doing this job. And I think what our international troops also from these 9 nations, including Canadians and U.S. is doing in Latvia is a great thing, because they are diplomats. They are in perfect contact with our societies. They are assisting in different social events, and they're greeted by our communities in smaller or bigger towns. So there is a really very nice interaction. And I would like to mention one last example. On 4th of May, I actually have been saying a big thanks to 2 U.S. soldiers who have been in their free time going on train, and suddenly they saw a person with a seizure. And this person would die if there would not be these 2 soldiers who could know how to help until ambulance was coming in the next station. So it's a great thing, and we have to popularize that. But on the other hand, we see also how the fake news are frequently spreading, that whenever something happens where you can see maybe a drunk person on the street or something like this, then some controlled Russian media will immediately spread this news, how these NATO occupiers of the Baltic countries are misbehaving. So we have to be vigilant about this and be aware about this. And one of my purposes also by touring here in the United States, and actually I came here from north, from Canada, is also to make Canadian and U.S. societies aware that we are living in a small globe. We need this transatlantic tie. We need to work together. And if you are waking up in a peaceful morning, it still doesn't mean that there are no cyber attack on you, that there is no fake news around. If we, as a litmus test, fail, if we fall later or earlier, you might fall as well. So let's stick together.
No, it's important comments. Let me talk a little bit about Belarus. There was some concern after the Russian Zapad exercise in 2017 that there could be some permanent Russian basing in Belarus. Certainly, I think if I read the news correctly, there was even a suggestion very recently that President Lukashenko would perhaps come to Riga. Help us understand how Belarus, a potential shift in Russian posture, could directly impact Latvia as well as the eastern flank.
Well, Belarus has a direct border with such countries as Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland. And if we are seeing the more, let's say, dark scenario, what happened with attack on Georgia, what happened with Ukraine, then we can't exclude that Belarus could be on the radars of future more increased, let's say, Russian activities. For us, of course, Belarus is a highly important country because we don't want to have any trouble on our eastern borders additionally. We understand that Belarus is already very, let's say, deeply integrated in Russian military planning. Their presence is over there, but there is still a certain level of Belarusian sovereignty. And I think in our message, if we would ask again us as a troublemakers or as a litmus test what to do, I think we should do maximum efforts in order to keep that still existing Belarusian sovereignty alive. Can we do this? What are our limits and what are the details? That is another discussion or question, but we can't exclude that if we do not act or try to influence the situation, one day we can wake up without Belarus.
I want to turn to one aspect of hybrid warfare that it's outside of your area of remit as defense minister. Perhaps as deputy prime minister, you have a little more whole of government interaction. CSIS has spent a great deal of time focusing on Russian malign economic influence and how it works. And we've really seen where money laundering, illicit financing has certainly has struck Latvia. It hit Estonia with the Danske Bank. It continues to hit The government and the Prime Minister has made really strong statements that this is going to stop, the corruption of this. How do you put that in a security context? How does the Defense Ministry think about drying up sources of Russian illicit financing or money laundering? Because that weakens Latvia, and it also helps other adversaries continue to do what they shouldn't be doing, either North Korea or what have you.
No, certainly. Well, first of all, there are a number of third countries for different purposes and for a long time have been using a lot of banks in a lot of Western countries. Yes. So there is not, in my view, a very huge difference between banks in Riga or banks in London or banks in some other cities. It happens. Yes, we have been noticing such activities in some of the Latvian banks. We have been in very close contact also with our partners in Washington, and I think in this case we probably will be among the first nations in the European continent, or first nation in the European continent, which will give a good example how we can manage the situation. So it's not exclusively something what could happen through Latvian banks. I think we can see that there have been involvement. You mentioned yourself this Danish bank presented in Estonia, or there could be a Swedish bank or something else. But on the other hand, of course, we have to be also a little bit careful about understanding of all these flows of monies, because the situation and information exchange between countries is also changing. So the things what we learned about this, for instance, this or last year, we did not know before, and nobody knew that. So I think we have to create some kind of a similar system where we can act within the Western world together, either it is North America or it is also European countries. But in our case, I think we will do maximum efforts simply to safeguard our banking system and make it transparent and clean as possible. And we hope that other nations will join this, because if we do not do it in a common unison, then there is no point simply to do reforms in such country as Latvia and not to do similar reforms in other countries.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's like whack-a-mole. You dry it up in one place, it will find another home. We have to eradicate it. Before I sort of move from the Russian challenge set, and I want to move into European politics, the upcoming European Parliament elections, have you put your former hat on. I want to talk a little bit about strategic communications and Russian information, disinformation influence. Are you seeing an uptick as we get closer to the European Parliament elections? Are there any themes that Russian outlets are focusing on? You know, Latvian politics is a very rough sport. And I'm just wondering if that disinformation space works very much within your political system.
Well, actually, I would like to say that we are relatively relaxed about that, because we know what to expect. And we will expect, and there will be a similar pattern in Latvia, like it will be in all other EU countries, which will experience elections on 25th of May for European Parliament. And to understand this, we have to first try to figure out what could be, let's say, the possible purpose of different Russian, let's say, media or information campaign activities vis-a-vis European Parliament elections. I think, and this is my hypothesis, that Russia might be interested to see European continent, European Union and Brussels and also European Parliament to be more fragmented. If it has it more fragmented, then of course the decision making is hindered, European Union tends to be weaker, and that automatically will increase the possibilities for Russian political, economic and any other influences if we are simply speaking about this from the perspective of power struggle. So from that point of view, I think we could expect a certain, probably limited, but a certain interferences or support or any other kind of media activities supporting any kind of political force in any EU country which is either far right but Eurosceptic, which is pro-Russian, which is NATO skeptic, which is anti-American, just name it. But it would not apply only to the far right parties. It would apply also to the far left and left-wingers, you know, to anybody who kind of is tired or skeptical about EU policies, and also to any individuals. So in that perspective, I don't think that they are specially differentiating for Latvian voters or Latvian parliamentarians. They have a basic spectrum all across Europe, and they will look who are fitting into their interests, who might be their lobby, or the supporter of the interests, and who will not be. So I would say that in many ways maybe we are better understanding this and better prepared in our countries than maybe many other more Western placed European Union places. So we know about that, we know what to expect. If you ask me, we are not a big country. We would have 8 representatives, I mean eight parliamentarians from our country in European Parliament. My estimate would be that we could count maybe 3, might be more, falling in this group of pro-Russian politicians, and I think the 5 ones will be quite fine. So I think it's relatively okay looking from our perspective.
Are there any EU/NATO countries that you're particularly concerned where this type of fragmentation and pro-Russian, anti-West message is going to be very successful?
Well,
now I'm going to get you in trouble.
we are not in the Chatham House rules here, and everybody's watching around.
Everybody's watching.
And you know, even if I like canon diplomacy, I still have my experience as a foreign minister. How should I put it? Because I don't like not to say things also.
Yes, be very general.
There will be such countries, but you know, what we have to understand is also that sometimes I have a feeling that not everybody in Northern America is really understanding how European politics are run. And I think if we want a good transatlantic relationship, I think there should be deeper understanding about these issues, including there must be also understanding that, for instance, trade is not done by nation states, it is done by EU, and you like it or dislike it, but that's an EU affair. So here, there is a certain kind of a problem put inside also among the EU nations, because you know soon we would have to adopt the EU budget, and there will be a large struggle. Who is getting what money, and for what reasons they are getting more, or for what reasons they're getting less. And certain countries or certain countries with let's say different type of democratic policies or understanding of policies than Brussels or in the West might be also punished just because, you know, they might acquire some more money in this budget. So it's not only the question of Russian influences. You know, I have a quite large respect for a number of Russian policies and activities, because the seed can grow only in that soil which is fertile. If the soil is not fertile, you would not have any plant coming out. And obviously, for Russian misinformation and propaganda, certain soils are more fertile and certain are less. And that's what we have to take care of.
Thinking about the EU, particularly as it continues to develop PESCO, we don't know what the full amount will be for the European Defence Investment Plan. Help us understand how Europe will grow its own security and defense identity, and your own philosophy on making sure that there's complementarity with NATO and not competition.
Right. Well, I understand that in North America, particularly in U.S., there's a little bit concern that PESCO might be used as a way to turn away U.S. military industry and just, you know, promote more European industries. I would like to say that it doesn't look so dark. Why? Because first of all, we all are interested that Europeans finally start to spend more money on defense, security, and also on military industries. That's very clear. If I have been preaching about this 7 years ago, then many our colleagues in European Union would tell, no, we don't have time for this, we don't have money for this. Now it looks different. Now there are starting to come a seed money for cooperation on security issues, for maybe some common purchases, for maybe some support for industries. So that's good. So far, so good. What is more risky, and where we have a good understanding of United States and Canada and other countries, is that first of all, looking from Latvian perspective, we do not want that common EU money is going into only few national industries, because we are not still one state. We are a bunch of states in the EU. So that means that also we Latvians would like to develop our part of defense industry, even if it's a small one. But if Europe is developing something, we should be a part of that. So we must have an equal approach once we are members of EU. Secondly, we are caring about our capabilities. And I, as a Minister of Defense, have to provide my soldiers, female or male, with the best weaponry, with best logistics, because we are here risking with their lives. So nobody will be capable to force me to purchase just something which is not of the highest standard, of course, with the prescriptions that I have money for this. So I'm not going to buy a European product if there is a better product available in the United States. So we will strongly defend within this plan the right of our good allies to have a fair competition within this network. So that's very clear. This is our position within the EU, and we have a voice as a nation, and each nation has one voice here. There is no proportional voices in this case. So I think that there should not be so much worry about this. We will stand by that, and we are standing for transatlantic position. The best comes first.
Absolutely. I'm just wondering, would love your reflections in thinking about the EU and its common foreign and security policy after Brexit, although we don't know when, how, what, who that process will take. But I think this is particularly felt acutely in Northern Europe. The UK has taken a broader role, whether that's the Northern Group, the Joint Expeditionary Forces, the JEF. I mean, there's some ownership and leadership. It leads the battalion in Estonia. Are you concerned that the EU becomes a less force and weight on Russia, sanctions, foreign and security policy when the UK departs the EU?
Well, will they depart?
Well, that is, as I said, we're not entirely sure how and what the path will look like, but
I cannot,
we'll assume.
I cannot stop my irony, because if I see that, let's say, one of the oldest European democracies are struggling for 3 years, let's say, with their identity without a meaningful outcome, that's a bit hard to perceive from outside. But on the other hand, it is a very, very good example how easily we can actually be misled, either by our politicians or by ourselves, if we are not enough educated, if we are not following the policies. Paradoxically enough, after Brexit vote happened, British expressed much larger interest in a common security issues with the rest of the Europe. So that is a positive, and we really are very happy that they are the lead nation, like we have Canadians, they are the lead nation in Estonia. And I have a quite strong belief that no matter how this, mess with Brexit will end up, British will be with us, and we will be with British. As far as the Brexit is concerned on a European policy level, yes, earlier on we have been quite concerned, because in many ways we in the Northern Europe, and I sometimes dislike even this description of Baltic states or Latvia as an Eastern Europe, and I can tell you why. Because if you are looking to the map, and if you are painting Scandinavian countries going down to the Baltics, and then drawing a line somewhere at the coastline of Poland, Germany, Denmark, and a little bit of Netherlands, then you can see that our eastern border is not a centimeter on the map further to the east than Finnish eastern border. For God's sake, anybody here in the auditorium would like to call Finland an Eastern Europe? So this is what I would like to say. This is a prejudice about something which is still inherited also in Europe. So we are a Northern Europe in a sense of our cultural identity, of our food, of many other things, and we have been traditionally associated with Britain and also with transatlantic link. If Britain really would leave, that of course would make influence of Northern European region within the EU policy a bit weaker. And this is what we would dislike. But since we don't know will they leave, because I mean, British will now vote in 25th of May for the place in European Parliament. So how the things will develop, we will see. So we are still carefully optimistic about the British influences on our continent.
Speaking of Finland, I need to come back around again. We've seen a real growth of non-NATO members, Sweden and Finland, working bilaterally together, defense cooperation. We've seen the U.S., U.S.-Sweden, U.S.-Finland bilaterally, trilaterally, U.S.-Sweden, Finland, both participated in Trident Juncture. This has always been a sense of a NATO vulnerability of their non-NATO status, yet they are taking active measures to enhance their defense. Is there and I'm sure you've strengthened your own bilateral dynamics with Sweden and Finland.
Well, let's be honest. I mean, even if they are not a NATO country, if trouble will come to the region, Baltic trouble will be Swedish and Finnish trouble. So there is no way they can actually stay out. So if they can't stay out, they probably have to plan all their security and defense systems in alignment with NATO countries and with us, with the Baltics. So there's no other way out of this. Of course, we can't influence their political decisions and their society's views on a number of issues. They have their own historic experiences in Sweden and in Finland, but I think as much as we can develop cooperation with the countries which are not NATO countries, and there are still limits, because I think that we can't go until the very end of this cooperation, because there is at the end, there's still a difference. You are in or you are out. So if they want a full cooperation, they have to make the steps, they should join. But if we can cooperate by, let's say, avoiding these lines, we will do it, but it will not be a full cooperation. So from our perspective, we only would enjoy if these countries finally would decide and join NATO, because NATO is not an aggressive alliance, not in the Northern Europe. It is an alliance which is guaranteeing freedom, liberty, democracy, and peacefulness in the North European region. And it wouldn't be bad if Baltic Sea would become a democratic sea. I'm not telling a NATO sea, but democratic sea.
Excellent. Before I turn to our audience, I have one question. I want to sort of pull back out and think about the transatlantic relationship. When I think of Latvia, as well as Estonia and Lithuania, in some ways it's Dixonian. It's the best of times and the worst of times. It is the best of bilateral times. There is strong U.S.-Latvian ties, security ties, the conversations we're having, the visits in the White House. I mean, it's been very robust. That's the best of times. The worst of times, the U.S.-EU relationship. We talk about trade. We are deeply divided, whether that's Iran. Syria has continued to be a challenge. So the community that is so important to Latvia is in a really difficult moment. How do you manage what I call the best of times and the worst of times? And what is your advice to Washington policymakers as you're seeing them, where everything's good bilaterally, but not so great at the transatlantic level?
Well, I still have a number of meetings forward, so I don't want to lose them. All right. Well. How to put it?
But do you agree with my description? Maybe
yes, I do, because our bilateral relationship, let's say Latvia-United States, it's perfect. I mean, Poland-United States, it's perfect. So there is no complaints about bilateral relationship. But on the other hand, we are in a situation where we have, let's say, a triangle. There are three friends, and if I have a relationship extremely good with a person A and very good relationship with a person B, but they're both quarreling with each other, how can we go for the common beer? It's a little bit of a problem. And of course, we are suffering because not everybody in Europe, let's say, understand everybody in U.S. and vice versa, because this is at the end hurting this transatlantic tie. And if relationship is not good, at the end it reflects back also to our security. So what we are doing, whatever we could do, we would like to be mediators, assistants to make these things to work together. Because if you ask for my advice, well, you don't need always to beat up your friend to make foes to understand that you are a strong person. And I think that there is a lot of truth in a description that many international institutions, either it is World Trade Organization or many others, they are in many ways outdated. And we need to change the world if we have to fit for the 21st century. But then you have probably two possibilities how to do this. The one is simply to dismantle it and tell we have nothing to do with this, or you can look around and gather your friends at the table and lead this reform. The problem is it's not about Europe and it's not about North America and United States. The problem is that we have a lot of other countries around, including China, which sees that West is not sticking together, and their power is immensely rising. And I think that if somebody in the United States would like to counter such kind of influences, for God's sake, you need Europe. I mean, and we need United States, we need North America. We can do it only together. So if you're looking also for trade deals, for instance, if you look for the modern trade deals, then if you combine the power, economic and trade power of North America, Europe, and you maybe add still Japan, then if you can make a common trade deal with this, that would be more than 50% of world. By doing this, we would create the legal system of international trade for the next decades. If we do not do this, then there will be somebody else making international trade deals according to their understanding, and we will be too weak, we will decline. Do we really want to make the trade deals according to their understanding and not ours? So if we want to keep a power, the influence, our value systems, we rather be smart enough to move and not to wait. So if it's just like with rafting on the river, if you want to manage your boat, you have to be fast with the current, you have to paddle. So let's paddle together.
Let's get out those oars and start paddling. Wonderful. Well, let me turn to the audience, and I want to talk about Huawei. Maybe we can spin that one back again. Oh, good, we have lots of hands, what I'm very excited about. We're going to take a couple.
Let's try.
Let's try, absolutely. We've got a little time, we can do that. So, Holly, I'm going to start over here with the two gentlemen here, and then the one in the back, and then I will move to the next side of the aisle. Please, and if you could rise and introduce yourself, please. Thank you.
Sir, my name's Howard Steers. I used to be a country director for the Baltics in the preparation for NATO entrance. At that time, you were being advised that the key component was deployable forces, and the old territorial defense structure was passé. As an old Cold War warrior, remembering how we were planning on defending the inter-German border with the German Home Defense Command, which was actually invaluable, I presume that that balance has changed a bit under the current circumstances. Could you talk a bit about the future that you see for Home Defense Forces, the National Guard in Latvia?
Oh, very good question. Thank you.
You want me to bundle them, or do you want to take them one?
Well, I can do it
Sure,
immediately
of
if you
course,
want. Look, our defense system is based on not large but professional army, National Guards, which are volunteers, and then we have a reserve. If you want to know the numbers, then basically we are planning that our professional army would be in a size somewhere between 6,500 and 7,500 persons. So it's one brigade. And then we would like to develop our National Guard from the current 8.3 thousand to 12,000, which would consist, which would be 4 brigades of National Guard. Additionally to this, we can count on about 3,000 reserve soldiers, which we would call. And then we still have extended education system for our youth called National Guard system. With all this, we understand that this is not enough, take into account geopolitics where we are. So what we are doing at this moment is that we are developing so-called comprehensive defense system in our country. That basically means, and I'm leading cabinet meetings for such an issue, about once per few months, that we want all state institutions, ministries, is it a transport ministry or health ministry or education ministry, whatsoever, all industries and private entrepreneurships and NGOs to look to their daily work daily reforms, whatever they do, also through the prism of security and defense. What would be their reaction if, for instance, the worst happens, if the war starts? So by doing this, we hope we will develop this system within the next few years. We will be much better prepared for any type of crisis, because we would like to have the possible opponents see our country as some small animal with a lot of needles, which is maybe a small one, but don't touch it. Don't touch us. We don't need anything else. We want to have a good deterrence. And as far as the National Guards, I think they have been doing a great job in the last years, especially after the Ukrainian war started, because and we also try to enhance their activity, because these are patriotic people which are spending their maybe every second weekend or third weekend not at home but in military exercises. And for those who are for instance involved more than 20 days per year in those exercises, we are also giving a financial assistance in a size of monthly salary per year. So some other different things are coming up. So we try to use our resources of a small country very rationally.
I think we're going to call that Operation Porcupine. Yes, sir, right there.
Of course, there's no reason not to have a completely state-of-the-art, fully integrated submarine sensor system with your Scandinavian neighbors. And I hope that exists, or it should exist soon. My concern is along these lines. There's the sense that you can give the Russians a bloody nose at the border, and then you're stuck with partisan activities after that. But I think you can go even further, and I'm wondering why you haven't. And going even further means adopting the Swiss model. Every Swiss citizen knows how to break down and fire a rifle, establish an elementary intelligence network, knows how to operate a radio, and so forth. Shouldn't you, given your small population and the possibility that you could be overrun, isn't it time to cross that boundary and make yourself even more Porcupine?
Well, yes and no. You see, we still think that the current system, where we have the combination of professionals, National Guard, volunteers, has not been fully exploited. I think that before we think about any kind of additional reforms, we have to really have to make a full use of that system, what we do have on the place. And at this stage, I would say we still have a lot to do within the existing system. Additionally, if you speak about, compulsory military service in our country, it would be also for the first years extremely financially heavy. Plus, because of heavy years of Soviet occupation, our mindset of our people are kind of traditionally against anything which is coming by force or demand from the state. So we rather rely on the volunteers which are patriotically organized and which want to take arms in their hands and to be really convinced what they're doing, than simply to have persons, who by occasion get the weapons. And actually, if you're looking to countries who have a compulsory military service, frequently it's only on the paper. At the end, they are calling in only, maybe 10 or 15% of the use. So it doesn't work so precisely. Switzerland, of course, is a very extreme good example. But again, we can adopt for our region and for our country a number of things which fit better to us. We cannot take one model and simply put it in another space 100%. And what I did not mention, I have to mention now, is we are introducing now a state defense education in our schools, which will be compulsory in 2023. At this moment, we have about 62 schools which are voluntarily participating in this. What does it mean? We will educate our youth in 4 major lines, starting with civilian defense and ending with military. So the best of them will be able also to participate in different summer camps where they could be able to listen to music and shoot with rifles and do things together. We will use our military bases for this. So we will prepare our youth for in the next 5 years for different type of occasions. It would be good professionally, because if these people will like it, they might be deciding to join professionals. If they want to do some other business, but they are still feeling that they want to be associated with military, they could join National Guard. If they will do neither, and they will just work in a business or a state institutions, they will be prepared for crisis, capable to take care of themselves and of their people and family around. So again, we are carefully studying systems in such countries as Finland, Switzerland, Singapore, and a number of other ones, and we are trying to adopt the best model for us. At this moment, I think we are doing quite good in this track. A lot of things should be still done, but I think the direction, just like with our military spending and plan for next 12 years, it's on the place. So I think we can be carefully optimistic about that.
Fantastic. Mr. Minister, I think we have one more question. I'll go right there. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you. Mr. Minister, Steve Flanagan from the RAND Corporation. Thank you for those insights. I wanted to ask you, following up on the question of how Latvia and your neighbors are dealing with the hybrid challenge, how do you assess the state of European cooperation among other European Union countries on both a political and an operational level in dealing with the hybrid threat, political warfare, other kinds of Russian malign influence? And what more would you like to see in that domain? And what about the state of NATO-EU cooperation, which was launched a few years ago to enhance that coordination because of this need for such a comprehensive approach?
We worry a little bit that the military mobilization issue, which is a civilian EU side, that to make sure that we can rapidly deploy forces across Europe is so important.
Well, you know, if I have to be optimistic, I would say a lot of things are changing and people are starting to understand in countries, EU countries, the need to cooperate more on security and defense issue. Either it is a Frontex or outside border, or it is internally exchange of information between intelligence agencies, or it is a mobility with construction. And this is what for instance, in comprehensive defense system we are doing in Latvia ourselves. But of course the problem is that we are still behind the challenges. And we do not have a unified approach across the EU. And yes, European Commission have been establishing, for instance, this Center for Tackling Fake News. But again, there have been only 8 or 10 people employed there. So it's a too small thing. Now, lately, European Union and Commission have been creating a new agency or recreating an old one into the new one regarding the scientific analysis of cybersecurity. Again, a good thing, but it will not be enough. So I think at the end, the push should come from the nation states anyway, because we must not have those pink glasses at home. We must do all the reforms needed to ensure our cyber security or media security in our own places and sites. And then we should share simply the best practices among EU, and whenever we can agree on some common policies, despite of fragmented EU Parliament and other institutions, we should push through this. But the initiative should come first of all with good practice and reforms in the nation states. And this is where we are lacking behind, because we can't do it on such a general level. We are not even a confederation.
Yeah, I think that the messages of urgency, purpose, and getting outcomes, not just processes.
Thank you very much.
That is we need to do better here.
But this is in general the Latvian approach whenever we come to analyze any suggestions within NATO or EU, because we don't want new institutions just because of institutions. We don't want, to have some document just because there is some kind of requirement. We need efficiency. We need to see that this is really tackling a problem and improving the situation. If we can't get this proof, we will not support any kind of reforms, at least from our side, either in the EU or NATO.
Well, I think that sounds like a winning recipe. Mr. Minister, thank you so much. What a great hour of great conversation, insights, and we look forward to having you back at some point to keep us updated on the Comprehensive Defense Program. And thank you for being such a stalwart ally in NATO. We appreciate our partnership.
And thank you to the United States for standing with us in the great times and sunny days. We will stand with you too.
Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking the Minister.
Thank you.